Hi, welcome to What's New in Android Developer Tools. I'm Jamal, Director of Product Management for Android Studio.
Hi, I'm Tor. I'm the Engineering Director for Android Studio.
Hi, I'm Ryan, a Product Manager for Firebase. Tor and I will be back in a bit. For now, Jamal, take it away.
Today, we're going to walk through a few updates on Android Studio, where our mission is to help you make high-quality apps across the portfolio of premium Android devices. First, I'll cover a quick update on the product roadmap. Then, Tor and Ryan will give a demo of some of the latest updates in action. And lastly, I'll wrap up with a few product updates. So first, let's take a quick peek of where we've been. Since Google I/O last year, we launched Android Studio Hedgehog, which brought things like Android Vitals into App Quality Insights and helped you upgrade your Target SDK with the new Target SDK Upgrade Assistant. And lastly, we refreshed the UI to the new IntelliJ theme in Android Studio. Moving on to early this year, we launched Android Studio Iguana, where we introduced a new UI check for Jetpack Compose, added support for baseline profiles, and lastly, integrated TOML files to support Gradle version catalogs. Alongside this work, we invested in bringing AI into your development workflow. Recently, we started using Gemini 1.0 Pro as a significant improvement to our quality responses. In this step change and improvement, we transitioned StudioBot to Gemini and Android Studio. Now, you'll see a few of these cool AI-powered technology demos in the live demo. Now, additionally, we actually launched Gemini and Android Studio to over 200 countries and territories. And of course, with AI privacy controls built right into Android Studio, you have control of what you share or don't share when using all these AI privacy controls built in. Now, while I'm excited about AI and how it can enhance your development flow, I'm equally excited on how we're continuing to focus on quality and performance inside of Android Studio. Quality is important to us because if it's slow to build or it's slow to start the IDE or you have typing latency, you can't be productive. So, for example, in our latest stable release, we addressed over 900 bugs reported both from you and from our internal quality release. And we continue to monitor performance, and we have observed less than 33% improvement in memory and performance. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about quality later on in the talk. Let's talk about our latest updates. So just the other week, we released Android Studio Jellyfish to the stable channel. And today, you can download Android Studio preview release of Android Studio Koala feature drop. So instead of talking about these releases, I'll invite Tor on stage to give a demo of the latest features in action.
All right. Right. So good morning, everybody. Let's take a look at our new canary, codenamed Koala. So this is based on IntelliJ 2024.1, which of course brings with it many new features. So I want to highlight a couple of my favorites. So first, take a look at this line right here, and notice what happens when I scroll it out of sight. It doesn't actually leave. It sticks to the top. This is called sticky lines. It might be easier to see if I select all. So you can see the context is shown at the top of the screen. And this isn't just for code. If I jump to XML, we see the same thing. I can see the surrounding tags. So this helps orient you when you're jumping around in code, like I'm doing just now. Next cool feature I want to show you is inline breakpoints. So this line here has multiple breakable locations because of the lambdas. And if I want to set a line breakpoint, in the past, we would show you a disambiguation pop-up. Now I can just go and individually toggle breakpoints on the line, like this. So there's a lot more coming with the 2024.1 release. IntelliJ 2024.1 was just released a little over a month ago, and we're planning to bring that to stable in Koala in just a few weeks. So we are dramatically reducing the latency between IntelliJ releases and Studio releases, and Jamal is going to say more about that in a little bit. But now I want to show you what's coming next, which is Koala feature drop. And the first thing I want to show you is a very small feature but I'm super excited about it because I think it'll be very impactful for most of you. So you may like the convenience of connecting to your phone using Wi-Fi, but by far the fastest connection for deployment, for low latency debugging, is with a physical cable. But it turns out that the cable you use matters a lot. So I'm going to show you these two cables. These are both USB-C, but one is 10 times faster than the other. And I can't tell by just looking at it. I have a little tag on one of them. And that's because one is USB 2 and one is USB 3. And it turns out that there are a lot of slow USB 2 cables out there. Pretty much all the flagship phones across mobile operating systems ship with USB 2 cables. And that makes sense. They're meant for charging, not for developing. But we're developing. So let me show you what happens when I use the cable that I happen to know is slow. I'm going to plug it into Studio and into my old test device. So look in the bottom right corner of the screen. So here we get a pop-up, and this is saying that this connection could be over 10 times faster if we used a better cable. So if, like me, you have a box of random cables, get it out of your closet and plug in until you find one that doesn't give you a warning, and it's going to be a lot faster. So let me use a fast cable. This is actually USB 3.1. This can be 20 times faster if you have a newer phones, Pixel 6 or later. And then let's run our app here. I'm going to also start device streaming. Oops. All right, so we can see my phone. So what I'm running here is the Pocket Casts app. And this is an app that's localized across many languages. It supports dark theme, you name it. But how would I check that it properly supports dark theme? I could go on my phone, go into the settings, and dig through them, but that's pretty cumbersome. So check out this cool new feature we have in the Running Devices window. There's the Quick Settings pop-up. So I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to say, give me dark theme. And just like that, my whole phone is in dark theme. Or maybe I want to look at translations. So Quick Settings, here we list all the languages in the app. So I can just go down and say, for example, Korean, so we can see the app updated. Maybe Norwegian. And on my personal phone, I actually run with larger fonts than default because of my eyesight. And I've noticed that some layouts don't work that well. It's very easy for us to check layouts with this. I'm just going to go down here. I can tweak the OS's font size all the way to the max, screen size. And you can see the app handles as well, so good job, Pocket Casts. All right, we can reset. If I just disconnect the device, it'll also reset these edits, but I want to keep this app running. So this makes it easy to test your app across a number of user preferences. But what about form factors? So we can't trick the phone into acting like a tablet, and for that, we have the Resizable Emulator. I've already created a snapshot of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and boot it. And so this should start in a couple of seconds. Yes, there it is. So when you run the Resizable Emulator, you get this extra toggle in the Running Devices window, display mode. So here I can, for example, go and see what this app looks like on a foldable. You can see it looks different. Or on a tablet. And this isn't just to look at the layout. This actually also lets you test the app flow if your app does different things based on the form factor. All right, let's shut down the emulator. And let me go back to the Pixel. All right. So the next thing I want to show you is the layout inspector. So I can launch the layout inspector here in the toolbar. And so this starts much more quickly before, more reliably, and it's now hosted within the Running Devices window. And I can still interact with my app here, but we also get these little bounds rectangles. This is showing where views are, including those that are behind in Overdraw, and even some off-screen views. And also, you can see these yellow highlights. This is the layout inspector highlighting Compose recompositions, because this app is partially written in Compose. So now I can, for example, turn on a deep component inspection. This is a selection cursor, so I can just navigate to the corresponding Compose code. I can go in and you can see the recomposition counts are showing up here. I can inspect properties. So for example, we can jump to the login buttons, on-click handler, and so on. The last thing I want to show is that we can pull down a snapshot of the app. I'll accept the default location, and I'm going to close when it's done, pulling down the, there we go. Let me close the layout inspector. And what we're seeing on the left now in the whole editor pane is a static snapshot of the app, but it has all the layers and textures. And so we can now go into 3D mode, and we can see this is a quite complicated app. It has lots of overdraw. So the compose onboarding activity is sitting up front. We can just go and hide that subtree. And if I now collapse to 2D, we can see what was behind it. So again, this app is partially written in Compose, and so it makes good use of previews. And we've been working a lot on the previews. We now support glance, we support where tiles, and we're also tweaking the algorithm. So while you have the list view here, we now have a grid view, which is going to be the default in Koala feature drop. We're adding a gallery mode as well, where you can look at each one. And we're also, of course, working on performance and memory use. So if you look at the list here, as I'm scrolling, you can see things are blurry briefly. That's because we render off-screen previews lazily now. So a new feature we have for Compose developers is UI check. And I can start it by clicking this button. This is basically lint for your layouts. So what it's doing here is it takes your preview and it renders it across a number of configuration, different screen sizes, dark mode, light mode, and so on. And then it looks for problems. And so in this app, it's mostly accessibility issues. Notice that as I'm navigating through, we get these little yellow flashes or animations in the right side pane. This is showing which configurations are affected for each warning. So on the bottom, I've selected, for example, the touch target size too small warning. It's saying here that the height of this touch target is 44 dips, should be 48 dips, so it's pretty close, but ideally a little bit bigger to make it touchable for big fingers. The error above it we can look at. I'm going to zoom in. So here we can see that it's talking about this label right here, and it's saying that the contrast ratio is under 3. And for small text, it should be 4.5. So this, I would agree with my eyesight, this probably could be a bit more contrasty and therefore legible. So UI check is there to help you with usability. Yes, that's okay. Thank you. Another really important factor for usability is startup time. And it's especially important in Compose, where the entire view framework is bundled with the app. And so the best thing you can do for yourself is to create a baseline profile. And we've recently made it a lot easier to create those. So what you do is you go into your app, and you invoke the module template, and there is now a baseline profile generator template. I've already created this in this project, so you can see this baseline profile module, and what it also gives us is a new run configuration. So what you do is you create this module, you run this run configuration. This is going to launch your app on a device. It's going to capture what the startup paths taken were, pull them back to Studio, put them in this file. You then check this into version control, you build, this gets packaged with your app and deployed with your app, and now your app starts faster. Again, just a few button clicks for you, so it's fast and easy, and you should all do it. But sometimes you need to actually optimize your code. And that starts with measuring, and for that, of course, you use the profiler. So let's run this app on the phone. And yeah, here it is. This is JetSnack, one of our sample apps. And I'm going to open up the profiler. So if you used the profiler before, this looks very different. So the new UI for the profiler is task-oriented instead of being organized by tool. So you pick the task you want to do. So let's say I want to look at the memory usage. So I'll say analyze memory usage and start profiling. So this connects to the phone, grabs a heap dump, pulls it back into Studio, and it's going to show it to me here in a second. Here it is. So if I, for example, want to know why segment pool is still here, I just find one of the instances, then I go to the references, and I work my way back through the pointers back to a garbage collection route to figure out why is this being retained if it's not supposed to be. I can also go to past recordings and select all my traces, and I can export them if I want to call a friend to get help, or import if I'm the one being asked to help with the investigation. But the most important thing that we're doing is to make it hard to do the wrong thing. So notice how this process here is debuggable. Let me show you what happens if I try to do CPU hotspot call stack sampling. If I select this, we now give you a warning saying you really shouldn't try to do CPU hotspot collection on a debuggable process. This is going to be misleading. We're also making it easier to do startup profiling. So all I have to do now is just choose process start. And when I do that, we'll briefly see, yes, look, it's building. So when this starts, we're actually we're rebuilding the app as profilable by tweaking the manifest. And now we're doing our startup CPU hotspot collection. I can stop. So here we get our flame chart. And if I go back, we can see that indeed the process is now profilable. All right. We made system trace faster. And last but not least, we're working on additional tools here. So one of the tools we're working on is integrating Leak Canary. So hopefully, if things go well, next I/O, I'll see you all here, and I'll demo Leak Canary. No promises, but I'm hoping. All right. Now, it wouldn't be Google I/O 2024 if I didn't talk about AI, right? But I am genuinely excited about what we're doing in this space. So last year, we launched StudioBot, which was an integration of chat with smart import analysis, with coding actions, integration with Logcat, and more. So as Jamal already mentioned, this year we're calling it Gemini in Android Studio. And one thing I want to highlight is that it doesn't do anything unless you opt in. So let's go and do that. I've already logged in. I've also already read all this text. I'm going to quickly click through. And notice on the last page here, we're now letting you choose whether Gemini can see your code or not. So if I say no, only what I type in this window will be sent to the servers. This was the behavior we shipped with last year. And so this is useful, for example, if I have, this is a scenario that actually happened to me recently. I was trying to update from Material 2 to Material 3. And so when I did that, I get this compiler warning that this field doesn't exist in Material 3. And I wasn't sure what the replacement was, but we can ask Gemini. And so it basically tells me that, yeah, you should replace this with label small, and we're off and running. So it's good for asking questions like that. Now, again, only what you type in the chat window is sent in this mode. But if you are willing to let Gemini see your code, we can offer a lot more integration and additional features. So let's go and give it access to the projects. You can have it ask per project, but I'm just going to say all projects now. Now you can see we get access to this AI-based code completion. And so in the bottom editor here, we can see this indicator now saying you have AI code completion. So let me show you how this works. So here's the file where I'm going to start editing. So the AI suggests documentation. Let's say we want to add some parameter documentation. So I'll say the price should be in cents. Notice how it's anticipating what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to add some parameter handling. So I'll say if the price is less than 0, in that case, I want to throw a legal argument exception. And it made an error message for me. Let's go ahead and write an enum class for the currency. All right, so it's proposing some fields already. I'll take those, and I'll also add my own. And let's add an extension function on this. So fun currency.format price, and it gives me this method. Pretty cool. Now, I chose this scenario deliberately to make a point. If you look carefully, Studio is warning you you're calling recursively here, because I basically have the same name here and here. And so what I really want here is to probably have this called that method. So I'm going to rename it. So again, with these AI tools, super powerful, but you want to pay attention. You're ultimately responsible. All right, so remember how we opted the entire project in to get access to code completion? Well, we offer more fine-grained control than that. So I can go in and create a file called .ai_exclude. I'm going to place it at the root of the project, but you could place it anywhere. This is just like a gitignore file. In fact, it's the exact same syntax and grammar as a gitignore file. So if I, for example, put a wildcard like this, I'm saying exclude everything in my project. So if we now go back to our file, we can see the code completion indicator says, yeah, it's not working because you're now in an excluded folder. And this isn't for code completion only. If I right-click, we can see that the Gemini menu is disabled as well. So you could put one of these in your project if you have a team policy against agreeing to code completion, or you can just exclude files that maybe are more sensitive. So maybe the JSON config files, maybe a key store file, and maybe we have a top secret folder with some files we don't want anyone to see. All right, so now if I go back, we can see code completion is active again. So code completion is really great at guessing what you want to do, but sometimes it's nice to be able to tell the AI what you want. And so for that, we have a new feature we launched yesterday in Canary, and it's called custom transformations. So let's just work on the code that is wrote. So I'm going to select this currency class, and I'm going to right-click and say, Gemini, transform selected code. And if I say add currency names, it's now guessing some names that seem reasonable and adds a new property. And it shows it as a diff, and I can say, yeah, good job, I'll take it. And I can operate on larger pieces of code too. So let's take this one right here. I can also use intention actions to invoke this. So Alt-Enter, Gemini, and I'll say add currency symbols. And now it's done something clever. Look at that. In addition to guessing some symbol names, it also realized it should rewrite the toString method to use that new property. I can also go back in the transform history. Actually, no, I'm ahead of myself. I can also refine this query. So if I say refine, I can add more steps. And I'm going to say add Japan and Korea. And so now it's continued adding to this transformation. Now I can go into the transformation history. And so if I don't like that last step, for example, I can go back to the previous one and I can redo it. In this case, I'm actually pretty happy with it, so I'm just going to take this and accept it. And here's our code. Yeah. Right. Here's another example. This is a method which is doing a depth-first search on a node in a graph, and it's using recursion. And so I'm going to ask it to replace recursion with iteration. Some of you may remember doing this as homework in college. And so let's see what Gemini comes up with. It uses a stack, and in fact, no more recursion. So this is really, really useful, very flexible, and it's primarily tuned for code. But it turns out that it works on other files too. This was a happy thing we discovered. So let me jump into a translation file. So in this app, Lint is telling us we're missing some translations for these 3 new strings. So what I can do is I can go and copy these English translations, and I'll jump into my Norwegian translation file and paste it. Now, this is not the right way to do localization, to just put English in there. But we can follow it up with a Gemini transformation. We'll say translate to Norwegian. And it's smart enough to not mess with the string names. It only updates the values. So I like these changes. I'm going to accept them. And if we go back to our original file, you can see the warnings are now gone. So yeah. I honestly could keep going on with examples of custom transformations for another half hour. I don't have that much time. But I want to again make the point that you do want to look at the diffs, right? Especially if you're doing something really outside of what the fine-tuning has taught it to do. All right, so everything I've shown you so far today is available in Canary. Now I want to show you a few things that we're working on for hopefully releasing soon, maybe some of it a little bit later. So the first thing I want to show you is a very small feature, but it's very helpful. So here I have a string function, which is computing the optimal alignment between 2 strings. There's no comments in the code or documentation. So let's go ahead and press Shift F6 to rename. And the first couple of options is what you usually get in Studio. But look at number 3 and 4. What's happening here is that Gemini looked at the method body, realized that what it's doing is computing an edit distance, the number of additions and subtractions to make one into the other, and that it's using the Levenshtein algorithm to do it. And so it suggests these two names. I'm going to go with edit distance. And we've taken this further. So let me open up the Gemini menu and say rethink variable names. So what this is doing is it looks at the whole method body, figures out how the variables are used, and proposes potentially better names. Now, I like the simple loop parameter names, so I'm just going to accept those and hit OK, and they're refactored. And what I really like about this is that naming, as we all know, is one of the hard problems in computer science, and the AIs are good at it. And by combining it with the IDE's safe refactoring facility, you get the best of both worlds. All right. Another feature we're working on, we've heard you loud and clear. You want us to help you write unit tests. And we are working on that. I'm not going to show that. But we're working on test scenarios. So I can invoke the generate menu in Studio and say test scenarios. Then I choose the methods that I want to create test scenarios for. So now Gemini is looking at this method, figuring out what it does, figuring out what all the edge cases are, and what I may want to test. And then it's going to suggest all the tests I should write to really cover this method safely. So let me show you what it just did. Look at this. We have a unit test. All the tests are named according to the convention of describing what the test does. We have a comment. And all I have to do now is write the test. But hopefully code completion transformation will help. Last small demo is commit message assistance. So if I, for example, want to check in the string translations I just added, I just click on the Gemini button here. It's going to look at the diffs and suggest a commit message. And yeah, update Norwegian strings. Looks reasonable. So good start. All right. So as you can see, what we're doing is we're sprinkling little AI productivity helpers across the IDE, and you can expect to see more of those. The last thing I want to show you is the Gemini's multimodal capabilities and 1.5's large context window. So with 1 million tokens, and soon 2 million tokens, we can actually upload most of the source code to the server to reason about. So let's start by switching Gemini Editor Studio over to this 1.5 model. So I'm going to say /model 1.5. This command won't work on your computers. It's a, it's a new thing we're working on. And so let me show you the app. This is the app, and we have this profile page that is a work in progress. What I want to do is have Gemini help me replace it. So I've already gotten a mock from the designer. So what you see on the left is what we want the right to look like. So what I'm going to do is go back to Gemini, and when I switched to the 1.5 model, I actually got these new icons here for attaching stuff. So I'll attach first the mock-up I just showed you, and then I'm going to paste in the prompt that I will explain in a second. And last but not least, I'm going to attach the project and say submit. All right, so what's happening here is that we are sending the screenshot to Gemini and all the source code, and we're asking it to please write the compose code to implement that screen in this code base. Importantly, using existing styles, themes, custom composables, and so on. So what we can do is we can go to the current work in progress page. I'm going to delete all this, and we're going to replace it with whatever Gemini comes up with. I've tried this a bunch of times before showing it to you today. Sometimes it takes 1 minute. Sometimes it takes 2 minutes. So I hope I don't have to do too much ad-libbing up here. Hopefully very soon now, we're going to see the answer. All right, we have some dead air. I guess it's a 2-minute scenario today. Any minute now. And there we are. Whew. All right, so let me copy this. All right, you clapped too early. This is going to be good. All right, so here's the new code. Fast preview, interpreted it very quickly. Let me run it. Let's run it, make sure it's not just copying that image. So here it is. And the best part, look at the code. it is actually using custom composables from my project. So this isn't pre-trained standard compose. This is composed the way it should be written in this JetSnack project. So, I think these capabilities are opening all kinds of possibilities for us in Android Studio, and we're working on a bunch of prototypes that I'm excited about. All right, so with that, I'm out of time. I hope you liked what you saw, not just the AI stuff, but all of it. And I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to show you what's new for Android developers from Firebase, and maybe some more Android Studio demos.
Yeah.
All right, take it away, Ryan.
Awesome.
Are you supposed to get a clicker?
Yeah, I think so. OK, great. Thanks, Tor. Another round of applause for Tor. Awesome. So I'm here to take a moment and share a few of the ways that Firebase is working with Android Studio to build, improve, and grow your Android apps. For those of you who haven't heard of Firebase, Firebase is Google's app development platform that brings together tools, technology, and backend services into one place. Millions of developers use Firebase to accelerate app development and run their apps with confidence. It's made up of almost 20 different products, most of which are activated by simply adding the Firebase SDK and a few lines of additional code to your app. Between Android Studio and Firebase, we're hopeful that you'll have everything you need to build and deploy high-quality apps every time. Now, with that said, let's jump to a demo. Can we get demo 2? Perfect. Great. And then there we go. So speaking of deploying apps, let's talk about a new feature that the Crashlytics team recently built to monitor new app releases. So let's say I've released a new version of my app, and I want to see its performance as it ramps up. With the new release monitoring dashboard here under Run, I'm going to click this, and I can quickly keep track of performance and determine if the release is healthy in real time. So what are we looking at here? At the top, you can see the version we're on, as well as Crashlytics' assessment of the release. Not looking good. Underneath that, we've got an active user chart. As you can see, we've got a really nice adoption curve showing the new release is showing up. You just saw it update in real time, which is super cool. That happens every 30 seconds or so. And then on the right-hand side, we've got crash-free metrics. And both of these charts show benchmarks from your previous versions. Below that is a list of any new, regressed, or other top crashes that we've seen in your latest release. This feature here is generally available beginning today. Just make sure that you've updated your Crashlytics SDK to one of our more recent versions. Now, if you're like me, your eye immediately goes down here to this crash that seems to be happening a lot, affecting a good number of our users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into it to go to the details page. And so what have we got here? In this circumstance, when I'm trying to debug a crash, especially one that's happening on a new version of my app, I'm trying to figure out the where and the what of a crash. For that first question, we've recently released a new feature we're calling Data Insights right here. So what we do is we analyze all the instances of the crash, and we try and understand the commonalities and display them to you here. So you don't have to go through a bunch of instances looking for the different, trying to figure it out yourself. So we can see that we are on Google devices on, well, that was Android operating system 13, right? And so we'll work on getting that back. Perfect, great. Okay, so as I was saying, we've got Google devices running Android 13. Looks like that's the primary use case here. So let's remember that for a little bit later. So I talked about the where and the what. For the what, I'm really excited to share the latest feature from Crashlytics, which is AI Assistance. It's part of the broader Gemini and Firebase feature set. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Generate AI Insights. So this takes a second. It leverages Gemini to analyze your crash, provide a cohesive summary, and when possible, recommend next steps. So I'll just zoom in here. So you can see the cause of the crash. It looks like the crash is caused by the app trying to access the camera without having the necessary permissions. And then it gives me recommendations here on how to debug, including running a potential command. Then it gives me next steps on how to resolve the issue, add the camera permission to the app's manifest file, request the camera permission, and then it gives me best practices on how to make sure that this bug stays gone. So we're really excited to be able to share all of this with you. And this is also generally available for you to try today right within Crashlytics. All right, so let's scroll down here. It looks like this is happening on line 129. So let's jump over to Android Studio and see what we can do. Cool. So I've got Android Studio open. Hopefully you can all see that. And I'm going to click this diamond over here. So for those of you who haven't used this before, this is a feature launched last year called App Quality Insights. And what it does is it incorporates Crashlytics data directly into Android Studio, so you don't have to hop back and forth between different windows. Let's find the crash. Oh, it's right here. Perfect. OK, so App Quality Insights is becoming even more useful thanks to advanced crash analysis. Remember that analysis that we just pulled up in Crashlytics? Well, I can click Show Insights here, and it's going to pop up. Gemini, and it pre-populates a prompt for you, so you understand exactly what's being sent to Gemini. We'll click Submit here, and what it's going to do is generate a very similar output, including a breakdown of the exception message, the stack trace, and an explanation of a potential fix that it wants us to do. In fact, what we can do is go straight to the Android manifest and click Merge. And it will take the recommended code and put it right into the Android manifest file. Voila. We're still actively working on this, but we're really excited for you all to give it a try in its current state. Let's move on. So one of the hardest parts of debugging is trying to find where the offending code is in your latest checked out version. So remember, we were trying to find line 129, right? So if we go to here and we look at 129, that's not that, right? That is not what I'm looking for. So what we've recently launched is this link here called Show Diff. And because I've built my app using the Android Gradle plugin 8.3 or higher, Android Studio is able to determine exactly where in my version history this crash occurred. So I'm going to click Show Diff, and you can compare what you've checked out with the version of the code the issue occurred on. So it looks like what was line 129 in the version of the app where the crash occurred is actually line 142 in what I've checked out. Phew. All right, so we know what happened. We have an idea why it happened, but I still want to try and recreate this crash so I can fully validate it. And that's where Android device streaming comes in. Powered by Firebase and located here on the right-hand side, we can easily set up test environments and reproduce my crashes right from Android Studio. Now, this isn't a virtual instance of a device. It is an actual device that I can reserve, boot up, and run my app on. And let's go ahead and do that. So I actually, ahead of the demo, went and reserved a device. So here it is with a fresh OS install. I just need to install my app, which I'm going to do by clicking Run. And while we're waiting, I wanted to highlight that when I'm done here, all I'm going to do is return the device, which will end my reservation. And it will also kick off a complete wipe of the phone. So nothing that I install on the device will be accidentally shown to whoever reserves the device next. It's also super easy to reserve another device. With a couple of clicks, right from that screen that we were just on, you can access a wide variety of both Google and non-Google devices. Okay, so the app is installed. This is the now an Android app that we use for a bunch of demos. And my team has decided that they wanted to build a new profile page. So I'm going to go to that profile page. Again, this is a Google device running Android 13 that we saw in Crashlytics. And I'm going to try and click the camera. What do you know? It crashed. So when I'm done, I can just stop the device, and I can return it and erase. This is available to try in the latest stable version of Android Jellyfish. We're super excited for you to try these new features, and we're optimistic that they'll help you build, improve, and grow your Android apps better than ever before. Back to you, Jamal.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Let me talk about one last update on our release process for Android Studio. So today we talked about Android Studio Jellyfish release, which just hit the stable channel. And we talked about Android Studio Koala, which normally in the past would go from us working at from now until the end of Q3 of 2024. However, in an effort to release more often and to give more space for quality, we're making a notable change. So if you didn't know, when you download Android Studio, you're actually downloading two components. On top, we have a bundle of Android app development components specific to Android development. And as the foundation, we have a latest release of the IntelliJ platform. Now, to aid in faster release, we're being more aligned to the IntelliJ release process. We're going to release Android Studio in two stages. The first stage is we'll have a platform release, which is just the IntelliJ platform, plus a handful of bug fixes and quality fixes. When the platform reaches stable, we'll then do a fast follow of a feature drop. Now, if you're familiar with the way that feature drops happen on the Google Pixel, this should sound familiar. So in this feature drop, we'll have the Android-specific features in that Android Studio release. So what does it mean for you? So number one, I'll get twice as many updates per year, stable releases. 2, more time that focus on stability and quality. And 3, you have a more predictable and distinct release cadence of Android features. Okay, so that's it. We showed you a range of features from Android Studio Jellyfish to Android Studio Koala Preview, from Gemini in Android Studio to improvements in compose editing to the latest features in Firebase supporting Android Studio, all made available to help you be more productive. Okay, on behalf of the Android Studio team and Firebase, thank you for watching.